Do you want to play a game?
They're here.
Welcome to another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. I'm your host, Ian Van Gogh. Each week, we'll be talking about horror movie news, horror topics, fun facts, questions, and anything else horror-related that you'd like to hear about. Now, you can find me playing horror video games, rocking out on the acoustic guitar, and recording this podcast live at twitch.tv/Ian Van Gogh. Also find me on YouTube at Ian Van Gogh and reviewing a different horror movie every single day on TikTok at Ian.VanGogh. Of course, get your very own Ghoul Squad merch at GhoulSquadShop.com. And be sure to join our Ghoul Squad Discord so you can stay up to date on all the stream, music, podcast, news, and updates, share movie recommendations, trivia, song requests, and subjects for the podcast, as well as much, much more. And of course, you can find the audio portion of this podcast on all platforms where you listen to your favorite podcasts. So we'll just jump right into the news here for the past week. Not too much going on, but a few things. So first of all, we do have an update on Steel City Con. Now, a couple weeks ago, I let you all know that Steel City Con in December, they're going to have a few pretty cool guests. So Kiefer Sutherland, Matthew Lillard, and David Arquette. Now, since then, they've also added Alex Winter. Of course, we know him from The Lost Boys and Bill and Ted, Excellent Adventure, Bogus Journey, whatever the third one's called. So he'll be there, as well as John Carroll Lynch, who you may know from Gothica or Shutter Island, or, most likely, Twisty from American Horror Story. I'm not the biggest American Horror Story fan, but I do love the character of Twisty. I think he's a really cool clown overall. So I think it would be pretty cool to meet John Carroll Lynch. But yeah, that's the only update as far as horror actors. They've added, a few other people. There's about, I think, 12 or 13 at this point that they've announced. But that was the main horror lineup so far. So as always, I will update with any new updates next week after, we'll see. Whenever they are announced. The only bit of horror movie news that we have this week is Pet Sematary Bloodlines. That's the prequel that's releasing straight to Paramount Plus on October 6th. It's officially been rated R for horror, violence, and gore. Now, the plot summary is as follows. In 1969, a young Judd Crandall has dreams of leaving his hometown of Ludlow, Maine, behind, but soon discovers sinister secrets buried within and is forced to confront a dark family history that will forever keep him connected to Ludlow. Banding together, Judd and his childhood friends must fight an ancient evil that has gripped Ludlow since its founding, and once unearthed, has the power to destroy everything in its path. Now, I'm assuming it's not connected to either version of the movies, and that it's an original prequel based on Stephen King's novel. If it's connected to one of the movie adaptations, then it would have to be the 2019 version, just because of the timeline. Judd being young in 1969 doesn't match up to the novel or the first movie, but I'm assuming that it's just a separate film based on the book with a different timeline, kind of similar to It Chapters 1 and 2. And speaking of It, that description of the movie, it does sound pretty similar. So I'm hoping they're not trying to go that route, but we'll see. But yeah, the 1989 movie adaptation of Pet Sematary, in my opinion, is the only good one. So I'm hoping for a solid, creepy installment. But I guess we'll find out on October 6th, which also happens to be the same release date now as The Exorcist Believer. So that should be a good weekend for horror. So we'll see what that's all about on October 6th. So from there, we're just going to jump right into our topic for today. Now, we have quite a bit of information, so it should be a decent runtime here for the podcast. I know last week's was pretty quick. It was about 20 minutes, ran right through it. So I think this one should give you a few more minutes of listening time. So today we're going to discuss standalone horror movies, trilogies, and franchises. Now you're probably asking yourself, what does that mean? Well, to clarify, what movies with no current sequels should have some? What ones should never have a sequel? Are trilogies better than franchises? Which franchises should work or would work better as a trilogy or just as a single movie? And which franchises should keep on going with more sequels? So we have about 22 of these, I believe. So we're going to start with number one, and that is Rob Zombie's Firefly Family Trilogy. Now, 2003's House of a Thousand Corpses was Rob Zombie's first movie. It's heavily inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a supernatural monster twist. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of it the first time that I watched it, but I've since fallen in love with this movie. Captain Spaulding is one of my all-time favorite horror characters. I have him tattooed on my arm. I'm a huge fan of it now. It was followed up with the 2005 The Devil's Rejects. Same characters, but completely different feel. It draws inspiration from more true crime horrors, such as the Manson family. It's darker, it's more brutal, and I enjoy the characters a bit more in that one. And then finally, in 2019, we finally got the third film, 3 from Hell. Now, unfortunately, the final product is very different from what was originally planned. So by the time that the movie finally went into production, Sid Haig, who plays Captain Spaulding, was very sick. So Rob Zombie had to keep cutting his role down further and further until, what we see in the finished product, the very small amount of screen time for the captain. Now, I don't know what the story or script was originally, but I know it was changed quite a bit because of Sid's illness. Now, I still enjoy the movie a lot, but I wish it would have been made, a lot sooner so we could get a legit third piece in the trilogy. This feels more like The Devil's Rejects, but it's definitely missing a lot of the heart that Sid Haig provided in the previous two. So overall, I'd still keep this as a trilogy. But unfortunately, the third film just doesn't hit the same or feel as kind of top tier as the other two. But overall, I'd still, I'd still keep it just how it is. So number 2 is Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Now, this is a meta mockumentary slasher from 2006 starring Nathan Basil as Leslie Vernon. Now, I love this movie. I've been hoping for a sequel since 2006. There's been numerous attempts at trying to get one made over the years, but has unfortunately never been successful. So at this point, I doubt that we will ever get one. Now, if you've seen this movie, if you've never seen this movie, I highly recommend checking it out if you can find a copy of it somewhere. Like I said, the first half is a mockumentary, second half is a full-on slasher, but it's so fun. It's such a different point of view for a slasher movie, and it's such a good time. So yeah, I wish we would get a sequel, right? At this point, I don't even know. It's been so long, but I wish there would have been more sequels in that. It would have been a full-on franchise. But yeah, regardless, single movie, definitely check it out if you can. So number 3 is The Exorcist. Now we have the classic 1973 original is an adaptation of the novel by William Peter Blatty and directed by William Friedkin. Now this movie is amazing. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's the subject matter of our latest merch design that you can pick up at GhoulSquadShop.com. And it still holds up to this day, in my opinion. Now, the 1977 sequel, The Exorcist 2, starring Linda Blair, is one that we don't talk about because it's such a terrible movie. Now, unlike The Exorcist and The Exorcist 3, this movie's not based on a novel. It's an original sequel to the first movie, and it fails miserably, and I choose to not associate it with the franchise. Now, 1990's The Exorcist 3 is written and directed by William Peter Blatty, and is based on his novel Legion. Now, this is the true sequel to The Exorcist, and another personal favorite of mine. It's such a different feel, and the story. I don't know what I did there. Okay, it's such a different feel, and the story from the first has arguably the best jump scare of any horror movie ever. Yeah, I've screwed something up in the notes there. Kind of glitched out for a second. But yeah, Exorcist 3 is fantastic. I really enjoy that one. Uh, we got our first prequel film in 2004 with The Exorcist: The Beginning. Now that's starring Stellan Skarsgård as a young Father Merrin, or a younger Father Merrin. It follows his first confrontation with the demon Pazuzu. Now this one's a bit odd because we have two prequel movies that are exactly the same but different. So let me explain here. So Paul Schrader was originally hired as director of The Exorcist: The Beginning, but Morgan Creek, the production company, ultimately rejected his psychological thriller approach, saying it was commercially unmarketable. So the decision was made to extensively rewrite and reshoot the script, recast several roles, add new characters, and give the director's chair to Rennie Harlin. So Schrader's version was originally supposed to be released direct to video as a bonus feature on the DVD release of Harlan's version. However, in the wake of Exorcist: The Beginning's box office failure, Morgan Creek abandoned the idea and allowed Schrader to present his version at several film festivals, as well as giving it a small-scale theatrical release in several countries under a new title, which is Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist. So essentially the same movie. I think it's the same exact script, but two different movies, if you will. But to be honest, I've never watched either of the prequel movies, so I can't say if either is good or worth watching. It was just something that never really interested me. Like if we don't have Reagan in it, and you know this being a prequel, I didn't really care. But yeah, they're still on my list to watch, but haven't gotten around to it yet. So in 2016, we get the Exorcist TV series that premiered. Now, it ran for 2 years. It had a total of 2 seasons. Now, both seasons are worth watching, but I preferred the first season. I really enjoyed the way they tied it all into the original movie, and it left me with some chills for sure. So if you haven't seen the TV show, definitely check it out. I'm not going to say any more about it. I don't want to give anything away, but I really enjoyed it. Like I said, especially the first season. And of course, in a few weeks, we'll get The Exorcist Believer, which is David Gordon Green's direct sequel to the original movie, and the start of a brand new trilogy. Again, I'm excited for it, but also the pain of Halloween Ends is still fresh in my mind. So I'm expecting to be ultimately disappointed overall, but we'll find out. So for this franchise, I say The Exorcist and Exorcist 3 are the only films that matter at this point. The show was cool and it was a nice treat for 2 seasons, but anything else can just be ignored, in my opinion. So, number 4 is Friday the 13th. Now, this is a tough one for me. Jason is one of my favorite slashers, but as we will talk about throughout this list, the horror icon or killer from most of these franchises is way cooler and much better than most of these movies. So I want to say that this should have stayed a trilogy, but that we wouldn't have had the pleasure of seeing Jason on a boat, Jason in Manhattan for a few minutes, or Jason in space. That would also mean that we'd only have one movie with the hockey mask Jason, and that just doesn't sit right with me. Now, I do dislike most of the movies overall, but Jason is so iconic. The evolution of his look is rare in the fact that every iteration is pretty solid. And I do love Kane Hodder in the role for parts 7 through 10. So I think we've got to keep it rolling. Now, unfortunately, Jason and Friday the 13th have been stuck in legal issues for a very long time, so we haven't gotten any new movies since the 2009 remake. Now, there is a project called Crystal Lake that is set to be released at some point this year. There are not many details about it, and at this point, I'm not convinced that we will get it this year or anytime in the near future, but we'll see. But let's hope for some more Jason Voorhees on the big and small screen in the near future. So number 5, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, this one for me is mostly miss. I love Robert Englund, and the character of Freddy Krueger is iconic, but most of these movies are terrible. The first one's fantastic. Part 3, Dream Warriors, is a very good sequel. And the meta 1994 Wes Craven's New Nightmare is another great entry in the franchise. But outside of those three, I can be very happy never watching any of the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies ever again. That may be a hot take, but these movies just don't do it for me. It's another one that the character of Freddy is so iconic that I think the movies are a lot better than what they are. But overall, they're pretty bad. So I could live with that being a trilogy with Nightmare 1, Nightmare 3, and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That would be perfect. Number 6 is Halloween. Now, Michael Myers definitely deserves a franchise, but the current one is such a mess. Now, Halloween is such a simple concept, but it got so overcomplicated and ridiculous with every sequel. Now, I keep the first movie, obviously. I'd skip part 2 due to it not really adding anything good to the franchise. We get the weird sibling story that defined the franchise for a very long time and the start of a supernatural Michael Myers. I'd keep part 3 because why not? It's just campy, 80s fun. It doesn't affect the main story at all. I'd cut out parts 4 through 6, as much as that pains me to do because I do really enjoy Danielle Harris and her role as Jamie Lloyd. The whole story is pretty lacking though, and then the Cult of Thorn stuff is just a bit goofy. Now, I do enjoy H2O quite a bit, and it's a toss-up between that and the 2018 movie. I like aspects of both. I prefer the version of Laurie in H2O, but it relies way too heavily on the sibling aspect, and I'd rather that just not have a part in the story. So I think I'd go the newer route. I'd keep Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. Halloween Ends could go fuck all the way off. So we would need a legit ending to the story that doesn't involve a weak-ass Myers and a shitty, overhyped finale. But yeah, we keep the original part 3, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, because I don't know, a lot of people were kind of on the fence with that one. Like, you either love it or hate it. I really loved it though. I thought it was just a brutal, fun time. Like, it doesn't really add much to the story, and there's definitely some things I'd cut out. But overall, I had a really good time with it. Halloween Ends, fuck no. We need another finale to Halloween for sure. So number 7 is the Conjuring universe. Now, this one is based on the lives of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and there are many different stories about ghosts, spirits, and demons. Now, we'll save the real life stories and debates for another episode, but as far as the movie series, I'd keep this how it is. There's a lot of good, there's a few misses in this one so far, but overall, I do enjoy it as a whole, and I hope that it continues as long as we continue to get decent stories from them. So, don't really have too much to say about The Conjuring. We'll just keep that one rolling. Fine with it. Number 8 is Hellraiser. Now, this one needs to be a trilogy. Now, parts 2 and 3 aren't the best, but they're still fun for what they are. I'm on the fence with part 4. It's ridiculous, but I do enjoy it overall. Anything after that can be erased, and I'm fine with it. I really enjoyed the 2022 version, and I do hope that we get a sequel in that universe at some point. But as far as the original franchise, it should have stayed a trilogy. It'd still be just as iconic as it is now, and there wouldn't be so many terrible Hellraiser movies. So that's my thoughts on that. Number 9 is Child's Play. Now, minus part 3, this is an A+ franchise. I love the evolution of the movies from a pretty serious start to a goofy, fun, meta middle, back to the more serious stuff with the newer movies, and then a nice mix of both with the TV show. It may not be for everyone. I personally love it. Like I said, part 3 is the only miss for me out of the whole thing, so I definitely keep it exactly how it is. I love me some Child's Play. Can't really complain about that one too much. So number 10 is Cabin in the Woods. Now, this one is a tough one for me as well. On one hand, it's really everything you need all in one movie. It has a pretty straightforward ending that doesn't warrant a sequel at all. On the other hand, I'd love to see more creatures and get another good story. I do fear, though, if they made a sequel, it just wouldn't live up to the first one. So because of that, I will say ultimately it's great just the way it is. I'm fine with not getting a sequel, but it would just be cool to see more of that world. Number 11, Evil Dead. Perfection. Watch Evil Dead. So start with Evil Dead. Watch that entire movie. Then start Evil Dead 2 from Ash's possession outside the cabin, and you'll have one continuous story. Add in the Army of Darkness for the silly time travel adventure. Absolutely include 2013 Evil Dead sequel and Evil Dead Rise. Ash vs. Evil Dead show is a take or leave situation for me, but either's fine. Now give me a new movie that brings Ash, Mia, and Teresa all together, and I'll be very happy. I don't think it'll ever happen, but I'll keep hoping. But yeah, Evil Dead's my favorite franchise out of all of them, and I just need more Evil Dead in my life. So, number 12 is Scream. So this one's probably going to be a hot take. Now, I'm a big fan of Scream. I'm a huge fan of the character of Ghostface. But these movies are so overhyped that it's comical at this point. Now, as movies, they are entertaining and they're well made. I don't think there's a quote-unquote bad movie in the franchise yet. But outside of the first one, there hasn't been a great Scream movie made. The characters and the overall story are so convoluted and ridiculous at this point, but I still wouldn't change it necessarily. I think the first 3 movies are a great trilogy for Sidney and the crew, but 4 through 6 should have gone a different route and separated itself from those characters. I always say that anything after the first one just feels like adult Scooby-Doo and is only getting worse. Now, I did really enjoy Scream 6, and I think it's one of the best Scream sequels. But as with all these movies, the character of Ghostface is awesome, and it's tense and fun to watch them rip through the characters. But the reveals are lackluster. They usually feel like a cheap payoff to the rest of the movie. Scream started as a meta commentary on horror movies, and it's literally become the thing that it was calling out to begin with. I know it sounds like I'm shitting on the franchise, but I really do enjoy it overall. I just hope we continue to get solid sequels and maybe a story that stops relying on the same characters doing the same things over and over again. Like I said, as far as the character of Ghostface, absolutely love him. A huge fan of the character, but the movies are just way overhyped, in my opinion. And like I said, it's adult Scooby-Doo is what it is. Said what I said. So number 13, The Thing. Hands down, one of the best movies ever made. It's simple, effective, and contained to one location that's far from any populated area. Now, the 2011 prequel is a solid movie, and it could have been a good addition if they had kept the practical effects. Instead, they went the CGI route over the practical effects, which doesn't make any sense. But it honestly doesn't really do much to add anything to the original movie other than seeing what happened prior to the events of the first. So overall, it could be erased and it wouldn't affect anything. Now, I'd love to see what the creature could do in a city or very populated area. I think they would make for a really fun, terrifying time. But also, I don't trust anyone to make a sequel at this point and not fuck it up. So I'd have to say, keep The Thing just as it is. No sequels, reboots, or remakes are needed. Number 14 is Saw. So these movies are a guilty pleasure for me, but let's be real. The story and characters are a mess, and I watch these movies for the ridiculous traps and the gore. Now, the first 3 movies are solid for the most part, and this is one that should have stayed a trilogy. Now, outside of the gore, violence, and fan service, there hasn't been an actual good Saw movie since part 3. Now, we'll see if Saw X can be a good addition since it takes place between 1 and 2, but I'm expecting just more of the same. Confusing, messy story, and some gnarly death scenes. But I'm fine with it. At this point, let's just keep them coming. They came out every Halloween for, 8, 9 years? So, it's kind of a tradition. So regardless of how much sense they don't make, I'm still fine with it. So just keep them coming. Number 15, Trick or Treat. Now, just like Behind the Mask, this is one that needs to have sequels. Unfortunately, it's been in the works since the first one was released and just can't ever see the light of day. Now, Sam is such an iconic character at this point, and he deserves to have more stories told about him. So I'm hoping that one day we do finally get a sequel and that it's just as good as the first. But unfortunately, I just don't see it happening. It's been in limbo for this long. Let's hope. Fingers crossed. Number 16, The Hills Run Red. Now, I feel like this is still a pretty unknown movie to the horror community. It's not the best, but it's pretty gnarly and it has a really cool looking killer. It has all the needed ingredients for a horror franchise, and it just never got the exposure that it should have. Even after almost 20 years, I'd still love to see a sequel to it. The babyface mask is such a cool design, and it's a bummer that we never got to see more of it. So it's another one, if you've never seen The Hills Run Red, if you can find it, a copy of it, definitely check it out. It's a very brutal, fucked up movie, and I really enjoy it. So number 17 is Final Destination. Now, the first two are the best in the franchise, but this is the type of franchise that's just silly and a little over the top, and it's always a fun watch. I'd keep it just how it is. We haven't gotten a new entry since 2011. There's supposed to be a sequel in the works. I'm hoping that it actually happens because I do miss the fun and the excitement of seeing a brand new Final Destination movie. Again, it's kind of like Saw. They're just fun to watch. They don't really need to be good. It's just fun to see the creativity in these. So hopefully we're getting a new Final Destination sooner rather than later. Number 18 is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, as much as I do enjoy part 2, this could be a standalone movie, and I'd be 100% fine with it. Give me the original and the 2003 remake, and I'll be happy. No other sequels, prequels, reboots, any of that shit were ever needed. Leatherface is fine just the way he is. So give me the original, give me the remake, call it a day. Number 19, Alien. So Alien and Aliens are classic and damn near perfect. Now, part 3 and 4 are quite the downgrade, but they're still fun overall in their own right. Now, anything after that should be erased. I had very high hopes for Prometheus and to get a legit backstory on the creatures in this world. I enjoyed the movie on its own, but it was a complete fail as an Alien movie, and Alien Covenant was a disgrace to the franchise. Now, we haven't gotten a single Alien movie since part 4 that added anything of relevance to the franchise. These newer movies only made things more convoluted and zero sense overall. I was really hyped for Neil Blomkamp's sequel that he was supposed to make to Aliens. Unfortunately, it never happened. It seemed like he had some really cool ideas. He would have taken it to a better place, but ultimately it just never came to fruition. So I'd say keep 1 and 2, obviously. 3 and 4 can stay or go. I'm fine with either, but everything else just needs gone. Number 20, Nightbreed. So the 1990 Clive Barker directed movie based on his novel Cabal. This is a classic, another one that never got the recognition that it deserved. There's a whole franchise worth of material between the novel and the comic books that came after it. So at this point, I'd be fine with a remake or a reboot as long as it's done well and it's an upgrade to the original. Again, if you haven't seen Nightbreed, please go check it out. Find the director's cut, and it's fantastic. Like, Nightbreed is one of my favorite hidden gems that not a whole lot of people really know about. So definitely check it out. 21, The Strangers. Now, it's crazy to me that there's only been 2 of these movies so far. The first one's fantastic. The sequel was a bit rough, but still a fun time overall. Now, there's supposedly a new reboot trilogy in the works. I do really enjoy the 3 masked characters from the movies, so I'm hoping for some more creepy, tense fun with The Strangers in the very near future, but we'll see. But yeah, another one that I'm fine with it. Keep giving me The Strangers. And last but not least, number 22 is Terrifier. Now, I'm not a fan of the first movie at all. I love blood and gore, and it didn't disappoint in that category at all. But I also need some story with my blood and gore, and the first Terrifier has 0 story, 0 character development, and Art the clown in that one is just really annoying to me. I didn't find him cool or creepy. He just annoyed me. However, I was apprehensive about Terrifier 2 going into it, but I was pleasantly surprised by how good it was. It ramped up the gore. It did give us a bit of a story, and it made Art the clown a little more tolerable, even likable in some scenes. And also the addition of the little pale girl was fantastic. She's my favorite character in that movie. we should be getting part 3 sometime next year. So if it continues the trend and it's even better than part 2, then I'll be very happy. So keep this how it is, or erase part 1. I'm fine with that too. We just start with part 2. But I'm fine with it either way. I'm just hoping for more of the Pale Girl in part 3. But all right, that's 22 different movie, trilogy, or franchises that we just went over. So what are your thoughts? Do you agree, disagree, or have a different movie to add to the list? Now let me know in Discord, Facebook, or YouTube. I'd love to hear about it. And as always, we did get some input from a couple ghouls. So Ghoulie Julie brings up the Cube trilogy. She says that Cube and Cube 2 didn't need the Cube Zero prequel. She says, and I quote, "I don't personally think it added much value to the trilogy. The story has holes, I'm not a fan of the acting, and it doesn't have the same element of mystery as the first movie." So I tend to forget about the Cube movies, but I am a pretty big fan of the first one. It was a really good time overall. It's kind of a different type of horror movie, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I don't remember much of the second or third, but I do recall the third being less than stellar. So I definitely agree with you. Would love to see some more Cube movies. I know there was just a remake. I think it was from a different country. I'm not sure exactly which one, but there was a kind of foreign remake to Cube. I'd be interested to check out here at some point. But thank you, Ghoulie Julie, for that addition. As well, Mrs. Ghoul says the Sharknado franchise is a gem and one of the best franchises ever. Now, I don't know that I agree with her on that, but they are some dumb, fun movies. Mrs. Ghoul and I did have a Sharknado marathon a few years ago when the last one was released. It was pretty entertaining, ridiculous, and exhausting. So many terrible effects and terrible acting, but you gotta love them though. They're perfect for what they are. But that wraps up another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to hang out with us. Be sure to follow on Twitch at Ian Van Ghoul, join the Ghoul Squad Discord, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on TikTok at ian.vanghoul. All links can be found in the show notes. Until next week, I've been your host, Ian Van Ghoul. Have a ghoulish week, and stay safe out.